Bhavatya kartu ishasya Shakshino nivritatmanaha Tadasya samsutir bandha Paratantyam chatatkutam Bhavatya kartu ishasya Shakshino nivritatmanaha Tadasya samsutir bandha Paratantyam chatatkutam Bhavatya kartu ishasya Shakshino nivritatmanaha Okay, online, please go ahead.
Tadasya samshritir bandhaha
Tadasya samsutir bandha
Paratantrayam cha tatkritam
Paratantyam chatatkutam
Bhavatya akartur isya
Bhavatya kartur ishasya
Sakshino nivritatmanaha
Shakshino nivritatmanaha
Tadasya samsritir bandha
Tadasya samsutir bandha
Paratantram cha tatkritam
Paratantyam chatatkutam
Bhavatyakratar ishasya
Bhavatya kartur ishasya
Sakshino nivritatmanaha
Shakshino nivritatmanaha
Word by word sounds. Tat,
Tat
from the misconception. Asha, the conditioned soul. Samsriti, conditioned life. Bandha, bondage. Paratantram, dependence. Cha, and Tatkritam, made by that. Bhavati, Faktu, of the non-doer. Vishashya, independent. Sakshina, the witness. Nirvita Atmanaha, joyful by nature. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhagavad Swami Srila Prabhupada. Material consciousness is the cause of one's conditional life, in which conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. Although the spirit soul does not do anything and is transcendental in such activities, he is thus affected by conditional life. The mind-body philosopher who does not differentiate between the supreme spirit soul and the individual spirit says that the conditional existence of the living entity is his lila, or pastime. But the word pastime implies employment in the activities of the Lord. The Mayavadis misuse the word and say that even if the living entity has become a still eating hog, he is also enjoying his pastimes. This is the most dangerous interpretation. Actually, the Supreme Lord is the leader and maintainer of all living entities. His pastimes are transcendental to any material activity. Such pastimes of the Lord cannot be dragged to the level of the conditional activities of the living entities. In conditional life, the living entity actually remains as a captive in the hands of material energy. Whatever the material energy dictates, the conditioned soul does. He has no responsibility. He is simply the witness of the action, but he is forced to act in that way due to his offense and his eternal relationship with Krishna. Lord Krishna therefore says in Bhagavad Gita that Maya is material energy so forceful that it is insurmountable. But if a living entity simply understands that his conditional position is to serve Krishna, and he tries to act on this principle, then however conditioned he may be, the influence of Maya immediately vanishes. This is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter. Krishna takes charge of anyone who surrenders to him in helplessness, and thus the influence of Maya or conditional life is removed. The spirit soul is actually Sat Chit Ananda, eternal, full of bliss, and full of knowledge. Under the clutches of Maya, however, he suffers from continued birth, death, disease, and old age. One has to be serious to cure this condition of material existence and transfer himself to Krishna consciousness. For this, his long suffering may be mitigated without difficulty. In summary, the suffering of the conditioned soul is due to his attachment to material nature. This attachment should be thus transferred from matter to Krishna. Yeah, so Prabhupada, he was talking about some of the Sanskrit terms in this verse, the Banta and the Samskritir. So he was saying that Samskritir, Samsara Avan Adalita Loka. What Prabhupada said is that our predecessor, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, previous charge, he said, Samsara Davan Adalita Loka, is that he's comparing samsara, the ocean of material existence, to a blazing fire of material existence. So he was saying this word here is samshastir, is applies to the spiritual soul that the conditional life of birth and death is subject only to the material universe, and the spiritual soul is eternal. So samsatir means is that the living entity also existed before the creation and was in another creation before, and that this process will continue to go on. So he said we were in many, many creations previously already before. So there's 8,400,000 species of life. And the spiritual soul is transmigrating. That's the process in the material world, is that the living entity, the jiva soul, is transmigrating from one body to another through the 8,400,000 species of life. So these are some of the subtle natures, some of the subtle forces that aren't seen or not very much understood. You know, life, Prabhupada was saying life comes from life, not matter. When I first read that article, it was in the Back to God magazine, and I thought that was like really great. Prabhupada was saying, I challenge those fools, those rascals, those mood houses, those scientists, the philosophers, the politicians. I'm going, oh yeah, this is great. This is just the kind of person I want to hear from. I hate the politicians, and there's so much that was already going on. Kind of see what exactly is going on, or what's going on, or what their style is. It's not a good situation. So this word of the bandha, bondage or conditional life, right? How is it translated in the verse? Bondage. So basically, how does the eternal spiritual living entity, who is transcendental to any of the conditions that pertain only to the material world, right, becomes subject to the conditions of the material world and is forced to suffer through 8,400,000 species of life, birth, death, disease, and old age. So when the spiritual soul is temporarily conditioned for a very, very long time, many creations of the universe, it's considered eternally bandha, eternally conditioned soul. This is Prabhupada explains in Nectar of Devotion. And then one who's nitya siddha, then he is eternally liberated. So once one becomes Krishna conscious, or becomes conscious of the fact that engaging in devotional service to Krishna and not in service to any of the illusory, temporary masters of this material world, or they call it the cruel masters of the material world, either whatever it is we serve, our pet, our family, our boss, our senses, our mind, our own bodies, then that is an illusory, temporary relationship whereby it will only remain as long as one becomes satisfied. So there's a condition on that too. Basically what they call, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. So the material world is full of conditions, and I wanted to look that up specifically. What conditioned refers specifically to the material world itself. That there are these specific conditions imposed upon the spiritual soul in the spiritual world. So that's the whole idea, and this is what Kapila Dev here, he's pointing out and he's identifying what the cause is: material consciousness. Right? So there's either material consciousness, which is Maya or illusion, or there's Krishna consciousness. So one follows the dictates of his own mind or his own senses. Oh yeah, and that was another thing that Prabhupada said, because he thinks he's free to follow the dictate of his own mind and his own senses. But actually, he's not free. He's under the control of his own mind and his own senses. He's under control of Maya, the Devi Prakriti. What Prabhupada was saying, Deviation Gunamaya Mama Maya Dharatya, is that the material energy is insurmountable and is very, very difficult to cross or to try to get out of it. And the only way to actually get out of it, there's all the processes. There's the karma kanda, worship of the demigods. There's meditation. There's becoming one with the Supreme. They're saying the Mayavadis, they don't even accept the form of the Paramatma. If they're just thinking everything is one, right? So, but there's meditation, yoga, meditation on Paramatma within, becoming one with the Supreme. But none of these activities actually purify the heart, and none of these activities will actually qualify the soul for going back home, back to Godhead or to Krishna Loka. May take elevated positions within this material world, but they're all temporary, and one will again continue to fall down again, and eventually go back down into animal species of life. So this way, it's coming up and going down, going to elevated position in the material world, even up to Brahmaloka, coming back down into the animal species, go back into hellish conditions. And so then they're thinking, okay, so the Mayavadi, it's just like even the college students were asking Prabhupada, well, what's wrong with becoming a dog? Or what's wrong with a tree? So, or a hog. The hog lives in abominable conditions and eats still. But according to the temporary the makeup of the hog's body and his senses, he's accustomed to eating stool. This is his nature, his guna. According to the three modes of material nature, is guna, and he enjoys it. Actually, he likes it. This is what the hog likes. Prabhupada was saying, if you try to give the hog halava, he won't take it. So, but they're saying, well, what's wrong with being, I'd say, if they're at least happy, if they're happy being a dog or happy being a tree, right? So that's illusion. The living entity is suffering and he does not know that he's suffering, but according to illusion, he thinks he's happy and he thinks he's free when he's completely under the control of his own mind, his own senses, under the control of Maya, or the three modes of material nature and material consciousness. So the actual principle is to be engaged in devotional service. So this is actually the secret, right? And it's the topmost mysticism, what Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita, is that has to be Krishna conscious, and one by actually becomes purified of his karma. Right, the Mayavadis, they said, no matter how much in Brahman he may seem to be absorbed in, or how much in the mode of goodness he may seem to be situated in, he actually hasn't purified his heart, and he actually hasn't, he can't actually purify the hearts of his disciples. So that's what happens when the yogis in Brahmananda, or if the Buddhist monks, they go into the Pradhan, right, the subtle unmanifested state of Krishna's unmanifested form, where everything rests in its dormant stage, in its temporary stage. Prabhupada was saying from the most gross to the most subtle, all the material elements wind up into its subtle state, a dormant state in Pradhan, and its unmanifested state will remain there again until creation again takes place. And then from the most subtle to the most gross material elements and the material senses become manifest. Because they were talking about, let's see, there was the material, the Jiva soul is entrapped by two bodies, the material body and the subtle body, and is also, and what was the other thing it was illusion by? So I was just thinking about that. See, there's another covering. But the living entity, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, he thinks he's the doer of the material activities, when in actuality, he's actually the non-doer, right? And then there's verses in the 6th chapter where yoga is actually karmically reactive. So they're saying one who sees action and inaction and inaction and action actually is actually wise and sees things as they are. So the Mayavadi impersonalist, he stops all his action, at least for some time being, right? And that's actually what Prabhupada said, the dictionary definition of nirvana is stopping all external material activities. So, but it's still material activity and it's still karmically reactive. So even though the yogi, he's not doing anything, he's still accumulating karma by this activity. So by engaging in devotional service and utilizing yukta vairagya, utilizing things that can be used in the service of the Lord, such as the cars and what is it, teletype equipment, the microphones, Jai Gora Nitai Ki Jai. So it's acting in a different way, where it's purifying a person's karma. So there's 3 stages of karma: akarma, karma, and vikarma. So akarma is negative activities. You have a question? Oh, my restless to speak? Okay.
The people are listening to you speak about how the living entity comes in the material world and he gets bodies and he has subtle bodies, and they can't locate where the person begins, where the person ends, because they think that if you ask them what they are, they say, "Well, I'm this body here," and you say, "No, you're not the body. You're the mind." And so they can't seem to place it. It's too subtle for them. But that's just because, unfortunately, they're engaged in activities that are primarily in the mode of ignorance. And when a person's engaged in the mode of ignorance, then he doesn't get a subtle take. He doesn't get a subtle understanding of what he's trying to understand. Just like a person, if you give a vehicle some very crude gasoline. They have different types of gasoline. Some is very advanced and it runs nice cars very smoothly and with no difficulty. And some of the gasoline is very rough and crude, not well defined, and so it doesn't run very well, and it causes so many problems and maybe accidents. And in the same way, because of our style of living in the mode of ignorance and passion, we're not getting a very good understanding. We can't understand even how to use this body, or what the purpose of the body is, or what the body is. We can't even understand these things, which are so simple. A little child can understand if you tell them, okay, what is this? It's my hand. What is it? It's my foot. Where are you? And they get confused. They don't know where they are. Then the teacher tells them, yes, you're the soul. You're inside the body. And when the soul comes into the body, then life comes. If the soul leaves the body, then there's no more life in that body. So these are very simple things for persons to understand. But society is so wound up and bound up in contaminated activities that they can't even see or understand the first thing of spiritual life, which is one is not this body. One is the soul inside the body. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you very much. Yeah, what I was reading, you said how the conditioned soul is absorbed in an illusion. Consciousness is the material body, the material mind, and the three modes of material nature. And the three modes of material nature are under the control of Devi Prakriti, of Mahamaya. Yeah, and it's insurmountable. So, yeah, according to one's position within the three modes of material nature, then what they're trying to subtly understand, they don't suddenly understand what the self is, or what the soul or the self is. Prabhupada was saying, what Maharaj was just now saying, a child gets all confused. He say, where's your head? Where's your hand? Where's your foot? Okay, where are you? Right? So he gets confused. Okay, so where are you? I guess they were trying to make some attempts. I guess it's been pointed out that Freud philosophy is actually fraud. Freudian philosophy. Karl Freud. Or Sigmund Freud. So, but he had some stuff. He had a dictionary. I had this book, a dictionary, psychological terms, and I was like really getting pretty much into the specific parts of either the mind or the self. So he had certain parts identified, right? You have the self, right? So the self. There's a specific witness, your witness of you. Right, your experience, your experiencer, right? So, and then there's it gets kind of complicated where you start getting ego, false ego, what was it? Super ego. This is where you really get confused, right? So, but this is what you get really wrapped up in ego, and then super ego, because that's even more trickier, more subtle. But yeah, it's a subtle nature to try to understand. Prabhupada said that he was talking about the verse how the air carries aromas from, as the air carries aromas, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. So Prabhupada was saying, so as the air, he was explaining it, as the air travels over an aromatic place, like the rose garden, the rose flower, or it travels over a stooly place like Stillfield or something, right? It has the quality of that, obnoxious or beautiful rose scent. So the living entity itself, according to these specific desires and the guna, the modes of material natures that he has acquired and developed, according to the activities of his desires and the modes of material nature during his lifetime and the actions that he performed, he'll get a similar body that's very much suitable, just exactly like that. You're saying this subtle nature or the subtle science is not specifically understood, as Krishna explains it very easily in Bhagavad Gita, and we can easily understand this. And anyone who would read this and think about this can very easily understand this. But still, there got to be some mental speculation going on. You know, some yoga societies or meditation centers in the cities, you know, which are actually really a farce, because that's not actually the real process of yoga, which actually takes 10,000 years to meditate on Super Soul, on your asana, practicing your breathing practices, eventually stopping all breathing into neutrality. So, but it can be beneficial, you know, but the ultimate benefit would be to come to the Krishna consciousness movement and read one of Srila Prabhupada's books out of the many books there are kind of floating around there in the where it was say in the yoga library, right, in the section on Hinduism, right, where you can read Srila Prabhupada's books and identify with that, you know, with what Prabhupada's explaining as Krishna consciousness. It's like, okay, they come to us and say, okay, it's all one. I practice yoga. It's like, okay, we pretty much all came from the same background. It's like, okay, come to us. We'll kind of like clarify things a little bit better for you to understand that Krishna is the basis of the Supreme Brahman and of the Paramatma, and that Krishna is to be understood by the study of the Vedas and by practice of yoga, or basically by any activity that you do. So Krishna is saying like Sarva Dharma Prityaja. Prabhupada or anybody else would actually say like your Dharma, actually the Dharma is the actual characteristics of the soul. So the soul is Sanatan, eternal. So the soul engages in its eternal occupational duty, Sanatan Dharma, right? But what they're let's see, because now I'm losing my train of thought there. So they're living at the engagement in its Sanatan Dharma, but it was but like as opposed to any other type of philosophical understanding of the self or the soul, you know, as pertaining to be the material body and to identify with the material modes of nature, inherit with that specific body, and act in a way that's contrary to the spiritual soul. And according to illusion, the living entity thinks it's happy, when actually it's a suffering, miserable condition. So, are there any questions or comments? Or time you have a question or comment?
Yes, I was wondering why it is that if the living entity just only has one before he leaves the spiritual world, if the living entity only wants to desire to enjoy separately from Krishna, I don't know, like, why so many desires? Why millions and trillions of desires?
Yeah, it's a network.
Why does that expand from that single desire to enjoy separately from Krishna?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Yeah, Prabhupada said that the living entity came into material existence since time immemorial. There's actually no history traced out any specific living entity that came into the material world. And the material living entities are practically unlimited expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's saying as Jiva Atma, we're marginal energy. We're transitional between material energy and spiritual energy. So somehow or other, at one specific point, we had developed material consciousness, which somehow or other places us at the center rather than Krishna in the center in some form or another, somehow or other, right? And so immediately we're placed in the material consciousness or in the material world because there's no place for material consciousness in the spiritual world. It's completely opposed. Water and oil don't mix. So yeah, in the material world, it's stated it's really more or less like a prison house. It's really more where they're actually talking about where there's the senses, and then where they say the subtle senses. There's actually like the subtle sense objects or the subtle senses, as in sight, sound, taste, feel. Right. So it's a mechanical arrangement that keeps us bound up in the material world. They dangle the carrot in front of the donkey, and the donkey takes one more step, one more step, one more step. He's piled high with laundry or sticks, and they really load him up really high too. You think you're gonna fall over, right? And so the donkey takes one more step, one more step. He thinks he's gonna get the carrot, one more step, right? So here in the material world, we got so many different allurements and so many different, he said in the human form of life, all sense is very powerful. Like the fish gets caught by the taste of the tackle of the fisherman. The male elephant gets caught for sex life and he loses his independence. And the stag, he hears the horn. The hunter blows the horn and it sounds like the female doe, and the stag, he comes, and so he loses his life by hearing, by the sound, or the frogs. He said where the frogs were croaking, he's calling the snake of death to come and eat them, right? So there's the material conditioned mind is like what is it? The rivulets that are constantly flowing into the ocean. So the rivulets of desire are constantly flowing into the whole big ocean of the mind, full of desires. And the mind itself, as we read or I studied, heard recently, that the mind itself, under other conditions and circumstances, accepts the same thing that it just rejected under another set of circumstances or conditions. Right? So the material world is full of all conditions. Under this condition and under that condition, what is it? With conditional. Even like Prabhu was saying, that in devotional service, unconditional love and surrender. Where even in the material world, love is conditional. As long as you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Right? So like unconditional love and surrender. But the material world is created in a specific way, but the living entity is completely inundated by a complete total barrage of desires, and it becomes completely bewildered. But where actually the real desire is not actually desiring for specific things for ourselves, but desire these things for Krishna and Krishna service. So in other words, it's thinking, okay, well, if we maybe cook this for Krishna, that would be nice. Maybe Krishna would like that, right? That'd be a nice service to do, rather than, something to do for ourselves. We don't mow our own lawn, but we mow Krishna's lawn. So the activities may seem to be the same, but it's not for the purpose of what was that? The term in Bhagavad Gita last night: self-aggrandizement. Even on that level, rather than on the level of like big yogis and impersonalists, they want to make a name and a legacy for themselves. It's self-aggrandizement by becoming one with the Supreme. So that's all contrary to. They were saying, my guru is so great. If you were to offer him $1 million, he closes his eyes and he closes his hands and he does not accept it. He says, so our spiritual master is so great, he accepts millions of dollars and he uses it in Krishna service. Like that, so. Yeah, so does that answer your question like that? Yeah. Yeah, so by the practice of the Bhakti Marga, devotional service, and concentrating the mind and not dwelling on sense objects, become purified, and you actually really lose taste for certain other things. You really don't have any desire. What Prabhupada says that you don't see our disciples here going to a naked dance show, right? But who wants to go to the movies and sit in this cold room and $20 for popcorn and Coke? Who knows how much it costs to get into the show, right? Bonbons, overpriced refreshments, right? Well, but they're first class. They're the best refreshments you can get, right? Right. But then you got to sit in this movie for like a couple of hours, right? So you commit yourself to something you don't really even want to do, it's something that when we were kids, boy, we wanted to get out of the house, and that's something our parents kind of dropped us off, had to get rid of us for a few hours for the day. All right. But it's a big involving thing, you don't really, like go to the zoo, just walk around, or go to the fairs, or it's like, I guess some different people got their own agendas. I guess over here they keep having these festivals or fairs over here for Pride, So, I don't have any desire to walk around in the Pride Festival. It's not really my cup of tea. It doesn't do anything for me at all, But you start giving up these things, stale and paltry. You start losing your interest in certain things, in the events and circumstances and the names and forms in the material world. So does that answer your question? Or so keep chanting Hare Krishna and keep engaging in devotional service. And be happy in Krishna consciousness. So, any other questions or comments? Maybe we can end class there. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam class ki jai.